I kept my word. The assault on the American auto industry, believe me, is over.
Donald Trump made a shocking announcement while standing at the podium. Through the automotive sector, the unexpected but typical news of his daring approach to governance sparked discussions, conjecture, and a storm right away of responses from both regular customers and industry experts in the auto industry. Before we begin, hit the like and subscribe buttons for additional updates on the American automobile for decades. Nothing had prepared the market to be a battlefield for corporate dominance and innovation regulation, for the seismic shift that was now initiating what had previously been a meticulously planned course for the abrupt upheaval of automakers left businesses rushing to evaluate the consequences. Customers were also left wondering how this shift would affect their purchasing decisions, financial situation, and driving adventures in the upcoming years. The announcement focused on a significant transformation of key automotive policies that had controlled the sector for many years. It wasn't merely a modification of the rules that were already in place or a gradual switch to a new framework. This was a major disruption that compels all participants in the market, producers, retailers, customers, and even overseas rivals, to completely reevaluate their tactics, with a broad deregulation of emissions at the heart of the decision. A decision that made it abundantly evident to domestic and foreign automakers that strict environmental regulations have compelled manufacturers to produce hybrid and electric vehicles, forcing businesses to fulfill progressively more challenging fuel economy and carbon reduction goals, the course of which had been obvious. Up until this point, the regulatory constraints that had shaped the industry's future were abruptly removed. The ramifications of giving automakers a free space to investigate avenues that many had believed were being phased out were immediate and extensive. Traditional automakers that had been investing billions in research and development creation of electric vehicles, EVs, in order to meet fuel economy goals, faced a completely different environment now that there were fewer laws requiring them to speed up the EV transition. Some businesses viewed it as a chance to go back to their gasoline-powered roots, refocusing their attention. The stock market's sentiment toward cars with internal combustion engines, which had long been mainstays of their lineups. The commotion in the hours after major automakers' stock announcements varied greatly, and the valuations of some businesses, especially those with significant investments in electric vehicles, suffer as investors begin to doubt the feasibility of their long-term plans. Others, such as oil and optimism for gas giants, increased as the expected demand, for now that gasoline was expected to last longer, the effect on consumers outside of corporate boardrooms was equally complicated for individuals who had been reluctant to switch to electric vehicles. The change in regulations meant they may now be able to choose from a greater range of gas-powered cars for years to come due to fuel prices. The focus shifted back to long-term dependability and vehicle maintenance as the main factors, instead of merely following government regulations, while those who had already switched to electric vehicles automobiles, whether due to economic or environmental factors, began to question whether they're in a future where electric dominance was not assured. Investments would still be valuable. International automakers also discovered themselves at a crossroads where European and Asian businesses that had long followed more stringent environmental, they had to make difficult decisions about whether to continue investing in electric vehicles due to regulations in their own countries. Full-speed technology in accordance with domestic regulations, or would they adjust to the new American environment, where businesses that had constructed combustion engines were suddenly given new life, their brands around sustainability? This change in the US created a special dilemma. Should they continue or change direction? Compete in a deregulated American market? The announcement's impact went well beyond just consumers and automakers. As electric vehicles became more popular, the oil industry, which had been anticipating a gradual drop in demand, now discovered it would be in a completely different situation if gasoline-powered vehicles were permanent. It had ramifications because it meant that the world's oil consumption would not decrease as rapidly as many had predicted. not only for energy firms, but also for the geopolitical IC relationship as countries that produce oil reassess their tactics to accommodate this unforeseen development. Dealerships also had to reevaluate their business plans. Many had been making changes in recent years to meet the expanding demand for charging stations for electric cars, staff retraining, and redesigning sales tactics to appeal to a clientele that is becoming more environmentally conscious. Now that deregulation was upending the landscape industry, dealers had to reconsider whether their attempts to, if electric cars were as successful as previously believed. Would consumers now prefer conventional models, considering the change in policy, or would the market for electric vehicles continue to grow even with the regulatory rollback? In the meantime, the automotive industry and the technology sector were closely linked due to the development of electric networks. For charging car batteries and autonomous driving systems had to halt and assess its next course of action. Tech firms that had made significant investments in the future of EV infrastructure was uncertain. Would automakers continue to collaborate with them at the same pace? Or would they now seek out new prospects that fit the updated regulatory landscape? As was to be expected, environmental advocacy groups reacted with alarm to years of progress toward a greener, the future of the automotive industry had appeared certain due to a combination of corporate investment and policy initiatives. This abrupt reversal raised questions about the long-term effects on climate goals by threatening to slow that momentum. Advocacy groups quickly mobilized and vowed to use the legal system to contest the administration's decision. Simultaneously opposes international pressure and public awareness campaigns, while the regulatory rollback gave the system an instant shock. Some industry analysts noted that the market's long-term trajectory was not likely to shift suddenly, and the trend toward electric vehicles was not only motivated by consumer preferences and government mandates. The industry's future had been shaped by global trends and technological advancements, even without due to stringent government regulations. Some automakers would probably keep investing in EVs. Others viewed this as an opportunity for innovation with fewer resources, spending billions on infrastructure manufacturing and marketing. Due to regulatory restrictions, businesses were now free to investigate new developments in hybrid technology. Alternative energy sources and synthetic fuels that were previously eclipsed by EVs highlight the deficiency of strict emission regulations did not imply a return to antiquated technologies. Rather, they simply indicated that, despite all of this, automakers were free to follow their own paths without being constrained by government regulations. There were many variables at work, but one fact was certain. The US auto industry had just experienced one of the most major changes in its past. The ripple effects would linger for years and affect every facet of the sector, from infrastructure and global competition to production and sales. What was formerly thought to be a landscape of uncertainty, opportunity, and risk had replaced the settled trajectory. Consumers had to reconsider their purchases. Automakers had to make difficult decisions, and global industries had to prepare for a new reality, which was a seismic event rather than merely a change in policy. One thing was certain: it would be discussed, examined, and dissected for years to come. Whatever happened next, the automotive industry would never be the same. The announcement's shockwaves didn't end there. The surface, although the first response was rife with conjecture and doubt, further investigation showed an even more complex chain of events that would transform sectors other than the automotive industry. Every link in our automotive supply chain, including manufacturers, was now being compelled to reevaluate its future with consequences that extended from financial institutions to suppliers of raw materials, from city planners to one of the most noticeable consequences of international trade partners over the last 10 years has been on supply chains for automakers, had radically changed their production and sourcing to comply with more stringent emission regulations and electric vehicle demand for rare earth minerals, such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel, has resulted in large investments in these essential components of EV batteries with newly discovered potential and the deregulation of emissions. The demand for these minerals for mining abruptly became uncertain due to the resurgence of internal combustion engines. The shock was severe for businesses and suppliers of these materials. Investments had been made in new extraction sites. Automakers and entire economies, like those of lithium-rich countries, had formed partnerships with countries were counting on the rapid expansion of electric vehicles. But these businesses had to change their minds.